Destination Medicine is a collaborative initiative of regional training hubs. With first-hand lessons learned from those who have gone before, this podcast is designed to assist and inspire anyone interested in pursuing a medical career in rural and regional Australia. Welcome to Destination Medicine. I'm Peter Lance. Amanda Fulton began her career as a veterinarian before deciding to follow her passion and true calling and train as a doctor in her late 20s. Today, Dr. Amanda Fulton is a GP registrar and trainee at Port Augusta Hospital in South Australia's beautiful Flinders Ranges. She reflects on the challenges of making such a big change, both professionally and by location. Moving from the bright lights of Adelaide to rural South Australia was an enormous confidence booster. The training program not only allowing Amanda to stretch her capabilities, but balance work and family life as well. As you'll hear, Amanda is also a teacher and a dancer. But before all of that, Amanda was a vet, as she starts by explaining to Nicole Goodman.
Veterinary is an amazing career. Sadly, it wasn't my first choice. I had always pined for being a doctor and sadly didn't get through when I initially applied in the first opportunity after school. Veterinary was a logical second option, but it never really felt quite right for me. And at a certain point in my veterinary working life, I just couldn't get the thought out of my mind that my real drive and passion would have ideally been human medicine, and the opportunity to apply for graduate entry medicine became known to me and decided that you only live once, so I'm going to give it a go, and it worked out and, took off from there.
Wow. So you didn't think about perhaps doing something else in the human medical field after medicine didn't become an option. You went to animals.
Yeah, I think I was always drawn to, a direct clinical role, working, in a hands-on sort of, in the trenches, diagnostic and, clinical type position. And it wasn't that I loved humans or loved animals more one than the other. I was, brought up surrounded by animals and had a real passion for them too. So it felt like, well, it's the same sort of thing, just in slightly different setting. So it was, for me, the most logical alternative.
Wow, that's fascinating. So when you eventually decided to sit the GAMSAT postgrad, what was your thought process? Were you excited? I mean, a lot of people are terrified by the GAMSAT. It's a huge undertaking. What was your mindset going in?
Do you know what? I wasn't at all perturbed by the fact that there was this examination, and I felt that I was a fairly good chance of getting through in terms of knowledge and ability to sit exams. I was more terrified of, this is such a massive decision to turn my life upside down and retrain at the age of 29, which I was when that happened, and thinking that, it's a big risk to take when you've already spent a lot of years studying and a lot of years, investing in it's a big commitment to go back. And is it going to be the right choice? I guess essentially a decade after, when I was first given the opportunity to apply. But I felt reasonably confident, given the veterinary training I had, that I would fit the criteria for the examination steps, and that definitely paid off. It was more for me, it was a fear of making the wrong decision, I guess. Yeah.
How did your family feel about you taking on this challenge?
I think it was a fair shock because people form a perception of who you are, and to everyone in my family, I was a vet and that was my identity. So I had to convince them that this was something that I actually really did want. And I think, it's just like anything, over time people adjust their views and adjust their perceptions. So we got there in the end, but as well as convince myself, I did have to convince the people around me that it was a good idea, for sure.
Very interesting. And I'm sure they're all supportive now that you're in.
Very, yes. Yeah, very much so. I think that they saw it wasn't just a passing phase or anything. It was definitely a lifelong passion and interest.
Amazing. Fantastic. How many unis did you apply to?
Do you know what? I actually only applied to South Australia. Yeah, that sounds a bit silly, but I felt that I'd already made a lot of sacrifices to pivot around and do veterinary, because at that time in the world, there wasn't a South Australian-based veterinary degree. I had to go interstate for that. And actually, my father was diagnosed with cancer at the time that I was applying for medicine, and it was a real priority of mine to come back to South Australia no matter what happened. So as much as I was desperate to enter medicine, I also had to balance it with an overall assessment of my life and what I needed. And I guess that's probably what defines me as a person, in that, I'm not sort of just focused on one thing. I need to take into consideration a whole lot of aspects of my life and incorporate lots of things into my life.
How have you found studying so far now that you're in? And is it everything that you kind of expected, that you wanted it to be?
I think, to be honest, it's like everything in life. You do have these sort of fantasy type ideals about stuff, and you get hit with the reality of life, to a certain degree with most things, and that it's not all roses. There's definitely a lot of compromise. There's the pros and cons with any decision you make. You're always going to feel happy in one area, but you've had to sacrifice or you've had to lose out in other areas. So that's not been anything different with that decision. And yeah, if I had to do it again, I would do exactly the same thing. So I don't think it was a bad decision at all. Everything, right from making a decision to go back to essentially a student lifestyle where your income is significantly reduced at the same time as accumulating help debt that has to be paid off later. So yeah, you've got to really want to do something to make that commitment where, you see your friends and people of your age group progressing in their career, potentially setting themselves up years and years before you do, because you've stepped out of the active work life. But, reflecting back, it wasn't a bad decision. I would do it again, definitely.
Absolutely. And these are the sacrifices you make. So, yeah, it'll all be worthwhile in the end. Absolutely.
That's right.
Let's talk a bit about location, because you're from the city, you're from the bright lights of Adelaide, big city Adelaide, but of course you're doing your internship rurally in Wilmington in the southern Flinders Ranges. Why the decision to go rural?
I had, from a very young age, for whatever reason, I can't explain it, always felt sad that I hadn't been born into a farming family and grown up in the country on a farm, and just always wished that was my life. I think it was basically a matter of fate that my husband was offered a job at Port Augusta, and we had spent a lot of time in that area travelling and camping and knew that region really well. Port Augusta's the amazingly located place where it's at the gateway to the Flinders, which is an amazing part of the world. And I was 100% excited when he came to me and said, "Oh, look, there's this job opportunity up there. Would we consider it?" And it was just perfect. I was like, of course, that would be amazing. I would love to have that opportunity. I was
meant to be.
Yeah. And if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have necessarily had that on my radar to move out to the country. But just that falling in our laps seemed to be, to me, just that was a sign that step had to be taken. And I was really excited and embraced that right from the beginning.
Fantastic. And what has that transition been like? So how has it impacted the family, yourself, being in that rural environment?
Overall, best decision ever made, really amazing. There was, everything about that little child in me that wished I had been in the country came to fruition, in that I felt just really comfortable and at home almost in that environment, despite having never spent significant amounts of time living rurally. And, you do have to leave a lot of things behind when you move from the city. a lot of my passions outside of work were, very city centric, I guess. So it meant losing a bit of myself in that way, but it didn't take long at all. Like, it was, only a few months in, I was like, yeah, this is definitely a great move. I love it here. And we ended up buying a house very quickly. So we committed to it.
And what were the things in the country that replaced your more city slicker activities?
So one of my big passions is dancing, and in various different genres, and that unfortunately just doesn't exist in the country, in smaller areas, like major country towns. There's always access to that, but where we were living, Flinders Ranges, it just it wasn't a thing. So the way of getting around that was that I started up my own classes where I was teaching. Start with, it was Pilates and yoga, which was a stream of the dance world that I always really was passionate about, and then ended up teaching ballet as well. Because there was no ballet school within a few hundred kilometres of where we were. So it was a way of both offering it to people who couldn't access it, but also allowing me to be a bit indulgent and get something out of it too. And then the other thing was that our move into the country preceded COVID only by a couple of years, so that very quickly I was actually able to reconnect with the dance schools that I'd been involved with via Zoom, because that suddenly became a thing. So I was able to do classes every week online, which thanks to COVID never would have existed. So that ended up working out really well.
Tell me, do you feel like working rurally has given you a breadth of experience that you might not have gotten had you stayed in the city?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's given me more confidence, definitely, because the sort of chain of hierarchy doesn't really exist in the country. And what I mean by that is medicine is quite hierarchical, and there's definitely a pecking order in terms of your access to getting your hands dirty and doing stuff. So, and that just doesn't exist in the country at all. So your exposure to cases and to opportunities is, by definition, is automatically increased. So, and for me, that then translated into giving me greater confidence to just give things a go as well, because it wasn't like I had to be fearful of somebody looking down at me going, well, you shouldn't be doing this because that's not your role at the moment, or that's not your level. It was just, you're the person. So you put on your big pants and you give it a go, and your training is obviously preparing you for those things. Yeah, and I guess you also get a slightly different demographic in the country, and maybe a bit of a broader sort of socioeconomic spread in the country. And as we all know, that comes with an accompanying sort of health effect as well. So you can find yourself in situations where there's some really, really unwell patients. In the tertiary centres obviously get the hardest cases because they're the tertiary centres, but you're the front line of that in the country. You're the ones who have to at least see them in the first instance to refer them on. So you're still getting exposed to those quite complex and unwell patients.
You continue to wear a lot of hats. You're a mum, you're a dancer, you're a trainee doctor. You're doing the Rural Generalist Training Program with the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine. Tell us about how you're finding the program and what else you're doing professionally.
I have absolutely loved this training program. To be honest, I feel really privileged. Since I've had kids, my priority really is my kids and my family, whereas, pre-kids, it was career. But one thing that I think sets the ACRM training apart is that it acknowledges that is a priority for some people, and you don't have to be penalised for having a family. You can integrate that into a career in medicine and not be ostracised by your peers because that is your top value. And also you can incorporate continuing work, at a certain level so that you don't lose your skills post maternity leave or post stepping out of the workforce. But it doesn't have to be that you return at 60 hours a week or nothing. There's the opportunity to really tailor your training to how it best fits around you. So I feel really grateful that opportunity is there.
And what else professionally are you doing other than the training?
I've been actually working with Adelaide University as a lecturer for the rurally located students. So there's a clinical school based in Port Augusta that offers full-time training in certain year levels to medical students. And that's been a really delightful part of my career, actually, that I wouldn't have probably thought of or even been given the opportunity to do had I been in the city. It was suggested that it was something that I could do. And, you're always a bit tentative at trying something slightly outside your comfort zone, but it's been really rewarding, and I love having that teaching element to the job as well. It's been great.
Bit of another string to the bow.
Yeah, exactly.
Amanda, as we wrap up, I want to know, what does the future look like for you and the family and work? Where do you see yourself?
In an ideal world, it would be a very similar version of what I'm doing now, which is allowing myself to be available and present for my family, but also in whatever capacity I can give to be able to still fulfill that side of me that really wants to be patient-centred and being in a face-to-face clinical role that allows me to help people every time I go to work. So I would envisage that it will be building on exactly what I'm doing now and making sure that I maintain the balance of enough flexibility, I guess, to fit in those other strings of my bow, but definitely remaining in the country for sure.
Dr. Amanda Fulton, intern at Port Augusta Hospital, Adelaide. This is Destination Medicine. Thanks for listening. Regional training hubs are supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program.